Welcome to the FSB National Webinar on helping business owners support their elderly parents. I'm Tim Aker, Development Manager for the FSB in Kent and Medway. Thank you for joining us today. Before I hand over to our first speaker, I'd like to briefly introduce all our panelists in the order in which they will speak. Dave Sharp is a regular at FSB events and webinars, acting as host or compere. He is also a BBC presenter, professional master of ceremonies, and event host. Today, however, he takes the role of speaker. Dave and I will have a conversation about Dave's personal experience managing elderly care through FSB Care and Podplan. Next, we will hear from Jackie Cleveland, CEO and founder of Podplan. Jackie will explain why she created Podplan, who it's for, and what Podplan membership includes. Finally, Jackie will hand over to Christine Husbands. Christine is the Managing Director of Red Arc, the providers of FSB Care. Christine will give a short talk on how you go about requesting Podplan membership and the other benefits of FSB Care that can help FSB members. After the three speakers, we will then have a question and answer session to end the webinar. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen to type your questions, and if you can let me know which panelist you'd like to answer your question, that will be helpful. Today's session will be recorded and shortly available on our on-demand page on the FSB website, in case you want to watch it again. If you aren't yet an FSB member, we'd love to have the opportunity to speak to you further about the benefits of joining. So please do visit our website, www.fsb.org.uk, to book a meeting with a membership advisor. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dave Sharp. Dave, good morning, welcome.
Hi, good morning. Good to be here.
Good to see you, and thanks for being a guest of ours today. So, Dave, Podplan, your experiences with it and FSB Care.
Yeah, I suppose really I ought to take you back to how the situation started. I don't think any young son of elderly parents plans to be their carer. It kind of falls upon you. I suppose that would be my first tip, is plan for it, because it can be pretty inevitable. But almost exactly 2 years to the day, I was in bed during the first wave of COVID. My mum had had a fall prior to the lockdown and had been in hospital for 10 days. I believe that's where I'd contracted COVID, because the restrictions and some of the measures that we now take for granted weren't in place then. Prior to that, sadly, my mum, who was head of the household, the literal mothership, had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's the year before, which was a devastating blow for our family. But when I became ill and didn't see my parents for 6 weeks, that was when the caring element of my life started to take shape. And although I wasn't there, I was orchestrating things literally from my bed. Because in lockdown, of course, my father, who was 91 at the time, my mum was 89, 88, weren't allowed out of the house. She'd just come out of hospital. Social care had arranged for care visits. Mum came out of hospital on the Thursday. The carers came for a couple of days. And then, unfortunately, when my dad met them at the front door and coughed, they literally turned around and ran off, leaving mum and dad to cope on their own for those 6 weeks that I wasn't there. So I've created a picture of a storm brewing there, and if anybody's on the call that's been in a similar situation, they'll know what I mean, and your emotions are running wild. So that kind of set the scene. That's how it all began, and it went downhill from there, by the way.
So you're in a position where you were in need of help and support, and those initial care and support, for want of a better phrase, just ran away. So what options did you turn to next, Dave?
Well, it was very difficult. Fortunately, the neighbours of my mum and dad, because they're nearly an hour away from me, were very good. My sister, unfortunately, was in lockdown living in Spain. Had a cousin who would turn up. But of course, what you very quickly discover, particularly with elder parents of that generation, is that they are very, very clear and specific roles. So dad had never cooked in his life, never boiled an egg, but then mum didn't drive. You know, dad had taken on some of the responsibilities of doing the shopping, but it was mum that created the shopping list. But of course, following her fall, her collapse and the Alzheimer's, things got a bit muddled. So dad would say to mum, okay, we need to get some provisions in. what do you fancy? And she would literally every time say cheese. And he took that literally. So when mum then fell again, I mean, it's quite funny when you look back. I used to call her the mouse. But when she fell again on VE Day, ironically, when some of the restrictions had been lifted and broke her hip, what they found was she was suffering from malnutrition, which is, you know, an awful thing to have to admit, isn't it? But Dad had just been given a cheese, and my cousin, who was allowed to go shopping, was bringing cheese and cheese and bananas. That's all they ate, you know. And it sounds crazy now, but it's just a terrible catalogue of things that are going wrong, and you just don't know where to go for help. And especially when, like me, I was feeling ill.
So how did you make the first communication with the FSB Care and Podplan?
That's a great question, Tim, and I'm glad you asked that, because when I joined FSB nearly 11 years ago, the very last thing, the last member benefit I would have considered was FSB Care. I don't even think I read the leaflet on it, because you think, well, it's not going to apply to me. I'm okay. You know, I didn't even know what the benefit was. So I was looking at all the other benefits, but it was in a conversation with members of the FSB staff. They knew that, one, I was suffering from what we now know as long COVID and all the things associated with that, the fatigue particularly. Two, I'd lost all of my presenting work. I gradually came back online. So there was the stress of that. And my wife also lost her work because she was in airport retail. So I was feeling under the weather, couldn't really care for mum and dad from a distance. And that conversation, they said, call FSB Care, you'll get a call back within 48 hours. I'd spoken to my doctor. My doctor had said to me, you need to take a holiday. Sorry, but you know, we'd just come out of a lockdown. It was very unlikely I was going to get a holiday. In desperation, I rang FSB Care and spoke to one of the nurses there, who was amazing.
An actual nurse?
An actual nurse. And what was brilliant about that was, I always remember coming off that call, and we'd been on the call for about 45 minutes, whereas the call to my doctor was about 4 minutes. Remembering how much time and empathy, and I'm going to name her name's Joy, she had for me. And it was great because it was independent, as a stubborn old bloke, as my wife would call me. I didn't open up to many people, but I felt like I could open up to Joy. Because we didn't know each other, we'd never met, but we spoke regularly, and she would constantly stay in touch with me. It was like having a nurse buddy, incredibly reassuring. And what she said was, although I can't help you with what we now know as long COVID, she could give me advice and resources to cope with things like fatigue. And in those conversations, that's when I revealed the other anxiety about my parents, and the other struggles. And I guess all of these things were intertwined. You know, the long COVID got worse because of the anxiety of looking after mum and dad, and not having any work led to all the other issues which emerged.
Well, that's interesting that FSB Care were there to give you advice about seeking treatment for your long COVID, but also that they could provide pathways for care for your elderly parents as well.
Yeah, and that was the revelation. So again, you know, we didn't know what long COVID was, but I could talk about the fatigue and the feelings that I had. And what was brilliant about Red Arc and FSB Care and Joy was the reading between the lines, you know, because sometimes, yeah, well, I'm all right, really. It's probably just a passing phase. No, Dave, you need to take care of yourself. The hardest thing ever to do, in my view, is look after yourself when you're looking after for someone else, you know, and yet everybody tells you, put your own oxygen mask on first. You don't do it. You just don't, but you should. But what was great about that was in those conversations and revealing more resources about coping with anxiety, you know, feelings of guilt because I couldn't be there all the time with mum and dad. That's when Joy said, did you know we've formed a partnership with Podplan? Podplan is particularly relevant to you because of your role with looking after your elderly parents. And it was like, who knew? Wow, that was like Christmas Day.
So you're told about Podplan, this wonderful diamond in the rough that you've found. Perhaps you could walk us through your experiences with Podplan from the first phone call you made.
Yeah, so I spoke with Jackie, and we had a very long conversation. We got on. You'll hear from Jackie shortly. You know, she's very personable, character who knows her stuff. Now, what I would say, Tim, is that I was already quite a long way down my journey. So, for example, when Mum was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, we got over the shock because she literally ran the household, all the finances. A lot of that was handed to me. So now I'm running 2 households because Dad didn't take that role. I'd put myself on a couple of courses. I went on the Alzheimer's awareness course. I wanted to understand how we should cope. I'd done some research into what help we might get financially. But in speaking to Jackie, I very quickly found that had I gone to Podplan earlier, all of that would have been found in one place. I'd spent hours sifting through paperwork and handouts and online materials. And then that one conversation with Jackie said, yeah, we could have done that. Even silly things like, my dad was losing his hearing. Mum couldn't use the phone anymore. We bought him a special phone. You have to do a lot of research. Jackie could have said, this is the phone for you. You need to get that installed, and access to grants. All those other things happened in that conversation. So I came to the party a little bit late, which is my only regret.
So it's not just a service that can point you in the right direction for specific care, but also it deals with the forms and other helpful advice. So would you say it's holistic care?
I would. Do you know what I found amazing about Jackie? It was that it was like talking to a friend, but an independent friend who doesn't judge, who says it's going to be okay. And one of the most amazing things Jackie said, and it is, Podplan is bigger than Jackie, but Jackie was my point of contact, was my mum is, and I'll finish the story later on, my mum is now in residential care. I solemnly promised her that I would never, ever accept a day where she would have to go into full-time residential care. And she made me promise her. And Mum's in residential care. And that broke my heart. But Jackie said, you made that promise when it was appropriate. Now it's appropriate that she's in residential care. And gave me all those reasons. And it was such a relief. And actually, Mum is well settled and very well looked after. And I'll never forget that conversation with Jackie. The guilt was just crippling.
Well, it sounds like it was a remarkable benefit to you, considering that you're also a businessman. People see you as a presenter, but you've got a business to run. How much of a support was that to you? Not just as Dave Sharp, the son, but as Dave Sharp, the businessman.
Yeah, incredible. Because I have a public persona. You mentioned there, do FSB events. I'm the guy that comes on stage all happy and hello and all of that, and deep down you're feeling terrible some days, and I'd be glancing at my phone and missed call, mum and dad, missed call, mum and dad, missed call, mum and dad, and you just panic, and it's really difficult. So when you are running a business, particularly during a pandemic, you're juggling all these different feelings and emotions. And as a 58-year-old man who was brought up in a working class town, and you don't talk to people about emotions, that was really hard. So to talk to Joy and Christine as well, I've spoken to, and Jackie, independent people and people at FSB. And then you discover something really amazing, Tim. You find out there's loads of other people in the same boat, all going through the same thing, all of a similar age. And you realize then that you're not on your own.
Yeah, I suppose that's the most important thing, that to know as an FSB member that if you have the slightest doubt, would you say your first thing is to pick up the phone and speak to someone at FSB Care?
Without a doubt, absolutely without a doubt. They do everything that they say they will. The callback came within 48 hours. The nurse who spoke to me was wonderful. We built a relationship that was long-term. I didn't feel like I was a problem to them or a bit of a pain. There was no, you are number 32 in the queue, I need to be cut off just when you get through to the receptionist. None of that happens. It's gone from not being on my radar as an FSB member to the number one thing that I tell people about.
I think that's quite remarkable. So what's, as we end this segment, what's the bit of advice you'd give to people who are thinking about long-term care for the elderly, and perhaps they're even their own health and well-being?
Yeah, definitely. Well, get help early, get support early. even while your mum and dad are in perfect health and mentally and physically they're able, have conversations with them. I was fortunate. This doesn't have a happy ending. My dad passed away then, and he was my mum's main carer, which is why mum is now in residential care. He passed away in November, but I'd had conversations with both of them, including the one about residential care. The downside is they're from that generation, very stubborn. We're all right, and I was trying to get them into a bungalow. No downstairs bathroom and outside toilet. So trying to manage all of that. So I would say get advice and help and support early, have conversations with your parents really early, get those things in place. And Jack is particularly good at this, in having those difficult conversations with parents that tell you they're all right and they don't want you to worry. It's just simple things. It's knowing where to go for the help, because if you do need it, you need to act really, really quickly and ahead of the game. I waited too long. My mum and dad waited too long. We had a terrible couple of years. Mum and dad were living in the lounge of a 3-bed semi-detached house with an outside toilet for 2 years. I mean, that's, in the modern world, that shouldn't have happened.
No, you're right. But good thing that you did contact FSB Care and got the support that you needed, and you've given a great breakdown of how you sought help and the help that was on offer. So thank you very much, Dave. And please do hang around. If you've got any questions, please do pop back and unmute yourself, and feel free to contribute to the conversation, because we heard a great deal about the benefits of PodPlan, but lots of people are asking. I know I asked this when I was invited to host this webinar today. What is PodPlan? We've heard it's great, we've heard it's fantastic, and now we can hear from Jackie Cleveland, the CEO of PodPlan, more about PodPlan. So handing over to you, Jackie. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Hopefully my slides are just warming up. There we go. Hi, good morning, everybody. First of all, well, thank you very much for taking the time to learn a little bit more about us. And thank you very much, Dave, for sharing your story. My story, and actually the inspiration behind PodPlan, was quite different to Dave's. We weren't facing a health issue. We were quite a lot earlier along in the journey with my mother-in-law. So back at the tail end of 2016, my mother-in-law, who at the time she was in her mid-70s, she was living alone. She was a widow in the family home. And I should just say that my husband is her only child and only living relative. So what was happening with us is she was coming over on a Sunday for Sunday lunch, and she started to talk to us about how unhappy various friends of hers were. So the conversation would go something like, my friend Mary has moved to a retirement village, and she feels that her family pressured her into doing that. And now that she's there, she hates it because she's surrounded by old people, really not very happy. And then the next week would come along and we'd have a different story. So this time it would be another friend who had been persuaded to sell the family home and move to a flat nearer to one of her kids. But the flat was in an area that she didn't know and she wasn't happy. She didn't like it. It was unfamiliar, really unhappy. And these conversations kept coming up. Now, my husband and I knew that actually what she was trying to express was that she didn't know what to do herself. And whenever we asked her, what would you like for the future? What are you thinking? She couldn't really verbalize it. She knew she had to do something. She was in her mid-70s, reasonably healthy with some minor health issues, but she just couldn't see the wood for the trees. So the tension was rising in our house. And one day I said to my husband, let me do some research and see what the different options are around where she lives, around where we live, and then we can sit down together and have a proper conversation with some real information in front of us and see if we couldn't move the journey, the problem onwards, and see if we could find a solution. So I did what you would all do. I jumped onto the internet. I think what I Googled was retirement housing options in and the area that she lives. And up came literally hundreds of websites. And the websites were full of terminology that I didn't understand. I had no idea what the difference was between sheltered accommodation, assisted living, what's included in a retirement village. I really didn't have a clue, and I was confused. And as I was starting to wade through all of these websites, all of which was taking me forever, up would pop, say, a flashing ad that would say it'd be about a stair lift or a home lift. Don't move home, adapt your home. And then I'd have a look at that, and then within that there might be a whole raft of benefits. Make sure you're claiming this benefit or that benefit. The whole exercise was so complicated. It took me such a long time. There are fantastic websites that are full of amazing information, but combing through them and understanding everything took me such a long time that I just thought there must be an easier way for people like me who want a quick solution and want to be able to come back whenever something new crops up on the horizon. So I created Podplan to be the service that I needed then and that you might need now or at some stage in the future. So let me take you through and show you what it's all about. So the idea is to make your life easier, and it's specifically for the me and the you, the person who is probably going to be doing the hard yards, doing the research and trying to find the solutions for your parents. And naturally, when your parents are settled and comfortable, you're going to be happier and more focused on the business that you are operating right now. Before I go into the membership, I just want to highlight that the Federation has recognised that more and more people are dealing with responsibilities for caring for their parents. So within your member benefits package, you have 12 months membership to Podplan included. And it normally costs £25 a month. So it's a £300 value ready to support you, which is fantastic from the Federation. So how does membership make your life easier? There's 4 different elements to it. The first one is it's much faster, as Dave mentioned, to find solutions to problems when they crop up. Members have access to a private website, and inside that website is very carefully curated, collated, and succinctly written tools to help you. At the heart of that platform is the dashboard. Now, the dashboard, as you can see, is made up of lots of different tiles that have questions or concerns that crop up regularly with families along the journey with their parents in the 3rd stage of their lives. So everything from, I think my parents lonely, could you show me some services to help, all the way up to I want to make sure that they're receiving all the benefits that they're entitled to. If on the top left you said, well, my parent still lives at home and I would like to see some of the support services, if you clicked on that tile, it would take you through to a range of services to think about. If you looked at monitoring device, you thought, oh, maybe there is some sort of device that could help them stay safe at home. If you clicked on that tile, it will take you through the basics. These are the different types of devices that are available. And then we have tools like a little decision tree where you answer yes, no, down a PDF, some information about your parents, do they still go out, are they mainly at home, etc., etc. And it draws you down to a link that will take you to a specific type of device that is likely to be most accepted by them and most beneficial for you. So that's an example of how the platform is built to make it faster for you to find solutions. The second aspect of membership is the ability to ask questions. You can do that in 2 different ways at any time. First of all, inside the platform is a help button. You can email member support, so just send us a message with a question and we'll come back to you with links to relevant information or answers to the questions that you pose. The sort of questions that people ask are, well, wide-ranging, and no question is a silly question, no question is too big, no question is too small. But sometimes members know what they're worried about, but they don't know what their actual question is. So for that, we also offer live support calls. I make myself available on Zoom, just like this, for members to be able to come on in and have a chat about what they're concerned about, so that I or one of my colleagues can direct them to the resources that will be most useful for the circumstance that they are facing. The third aspect of membership is preparation. So we know the challenges that are likely to come your way. Of course, we don't know what the future is going to hold for your parents, but what I do know for sure, and I see it time and time again, and Dave mentioned it too, knowledge is liberating. It makes you feel much more equipped to cope with whatever might be around the corner. So to prepare our members, we do two different things. First of all, in your first 6 weeks with us, we send you a very short 3-minute explainer video, just one a week for the first 6 weeks. We call them our Essential Knowledge video series, and they cover lots of different topics, like how do you go about getting help from the local authority, how are care services are inspected when you get to that stage of your journey, you know, even how much is all of this likely to be costing us, and more. If you are happy to invest just 18 minutes of your time over the 6-week period, you're going to learn quite a lot more than you probably know today. So that's the first step in boosting your confidence, because your knowledge bank is growing. The second way that we prepare our members is through our weekly Podplan post email. Once a week, on a Saturday morning at around 6 a.m, out comes the Podplan post email. It's an email directly from me to our members. And in that short email, you will see a number of different things. It can be where I highlight one of the aspects or tools that are available for you inside the membership to really remind you of what's there when you need it. It may be that I highlight a particular assistive product and tell you under which circumstance you might find that this is useful to buy to help your mum or dad. I might talk about an acronym that you're likely to come across somewhere along in the journey, explain for you what it means. Or I might just offer a very practical tip. How do you increase the font size on your parents' mobile phones, all the different devices, so that if they're having trouble seeing or hearing it, then you've really got those settings adapted as best as they can. And finally, in the Podplan post, you have the dates to register for those live calls that you may wish to have a chat with me. All it takes is 60 seconds once a week. And you can imagine over a 12-month period, you get to the end of that thinking, yeah, okay, I know what to do under various circumstances and I know where to get help when I need it. The fourth and final benefit is that we really do our best to help you take steps forward with difficult subjects. Now, legal issues is the big one that comes up, particularly wills and powers of attorney, because it's one thing to either know that your parent hasn't got a will, but you want to sort that out, or if you're a little bit worried that maybe their will isn't valid, or that you know they haven't sorted out power of attorney, but you've read something or you've had a chat with me about the benefits of that and you think, gee, I really think this is something we need to arrange. But I know that when you want to do something, your parents may not want to do it, or it might take you so much time to find a lawyer and arrange it and convince them it's the right thing, that taking that step forward, wanting to do it and being able to do it are two different things. So to help you with that, inside the membership, we have a partnership with a regulated legal provider. And what they do is there's a helpline inside the member pages. Our legal partners are happy to take instruction for wills or powers of attorney, either over the phone or via Zoom call, and you can schedule an appointment. So the way that would work is you would set it up with your mum or dad. you'd go, you'd sit with them. If it was over the phone, you would have to leave the room because obviously they can't take instruction with you right there. The details are obtained, the documents are then sent in the post, ready for them to be signed, witnessed and sent back. So we make it as easy as possible for you to get sorted with legal issues. Now, I should say that there are additional fees associated with doing that, but PodPlan members have fixed fee packages and they are discounted. And the second way we help you is our free probate helpline. And this is something that actually Dave was able to very early on test out for us when we were looking at bringing it into the membership. If you are the executor of your parents' estate, if you haven't ever undertaken that role, then chances are you won't know where to even begin. So to help our members, because we want to be there wherever they are in their stage of life with their parents, we have a free 24-hour helpline operated by regulated legal professionals where you can ring up and literally say, I don't know what to do, please help me. You will receive free step-by-step guides with checklists of what you need to do and when you need to do it by, with links to the services that can be helpful to you. But if you don't have the time to do all of the tasks that are involved, we also have some fixed fee packages sitting inside the membership for you. You can get a little bit of help to fulfill some of the tasks, a little more, quite a lot, or you can hand it all over to a solicitor, and all of those package services are available at a discounted rate. And the final way that we help you to move forward beyond legal issues are via our PodPlan experts. Inside the membership, we have experts who are happy to provide initial guidance to our members free of charge. So I've just picked two of them here. On the bottom right, you can see Kate. She is an occupational therapist. She and her team specialize in getting homes sorted and adapted. So if your parents say they are never moving, but you want to make sure that they are as comfortable and as safe as possible, then Kate is able to talk you through some of the aspects of the home that you might want to think about and the adaptations that could be made. Tim is a mental capacity expert. So if your family has a diagnosis, a dementia diagnosis, and there are questions about changing wills or powers of attorney, then Tim is the person to consult to make sure that those documents are completed and are legally valid. So that's it. The 4 ways that we do our very best to make life easier for you. We make it quicker to find solutions, offer you support whenever you need it, equipped you as best as we can with the knowledge that you'll need for the years ahead, and help you to take action in those areas where you might find that it's going to take even more time to get your parents sorted. Finally, I thought I'd end off by telling you why we're called PodPlan. As business owners yourself, I'm sure you are acutely aware of the agony with how to choose your company name. And PodPlan for us was actually inspired by orca whales. It turns out that the orca whale has one of the strongest family bonds in the animal kingdom. Adult orcas are known to travel back hundreds of miles to their family pods, particularly in times of mourning, believe it or not. They basically come back for the funeral. So it's not just funeral times, but pod really felt like it encapsulated the feelings that our members have towards their families, that protection and returning and wanting to look after them as best they can. And plan is, as you've heard, something we really encourage our members to do because we know there are many benefits to be had. Then we added a little icon that we felt really symbolized caring and togetherness and discussion, and together that created PodPlan. That's it from me. I look forward to answering any of your questions. I do hope that if there is something in the membership that you think would be valuable for your family right now, that you'll sign up. But even if not, don't hesitate to tell your colleagues about it, because as Dave said, times can change very quickly, circumstances can change very quickly, and we are here to help. So I'm going to hand over to Christine, who's going to talk to you about FSB Care and how you can arrange your membership if you like.
Just while that's loading, good morning. Is it still morning? Yes, it's good morning, everybody. And thank you so much to Dave for sharing his story so openly, and really demonstrating the importance and the benefits of Podplan, but also how FSB Care supports that in a wider fashion, and just how these things can all come together in terms of your own health and your own situation and your parents' situations as well. And thank you so much, Jackie, for taking us through that. I learned a lot, even though we've known each other for a long time. So I still learned things. So that was fabulous. Thank you. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I just wanted briefly to just tell you and remind you, for those of you who are aware of FSB Care, what FSB Care is, and also touch on Podplan and how you access Podplan through FSB Care. So FSB Care, the key features, as you probably know, but I'll remind you again, is access to a dedicated nurse. In Dave's instance, it was Joy, but we have lots of other equally fabulous nurses in the business. And basically they're there to support an individual with any long-term physical or mental health condition. It doesn't actually have to be a diagnosed health condition. In Dave's situation, he had long COVID, but it wasn't diagnosed then. And he was suffering, mentally with everything going on for him. So it doesn't have to be a diagnosed condition. It can include anything from cancer, cardiovascular, any depressed, stress and anxiety, elder care, bereavement, and the list just goes on. Anything that's giving someone a serious problem. We're not there for short-term queries, like I've had a high temperature for a couple of days, what should I do, and things like that. They're things that need to be directed to the NHS. The service is there for members, for themselves, and that's any form of member, whether it's a full member or an associate member. And members can also get advice about the employee, but the support and the discussions with the nurse will be with the member directly. The service can be purchased by members for employees and other people at an additional cost, but the FSB funds it for members. So there's a dedicated nurse support throughout. It's very difficult to list all the things that the nurse can do and what goes on. As Dave said, the conversations are very relaxed and people have as much time as they wish, and that the conversations are led by the member, by the individual. It's really whatever they want to talk about, whatever's worrying them. So they have regular supportive phone calls from the same nurse, so they get to know each other. As Dave said, you got to know Joy very well, and similarly with all the other nurses, they get to know each other very well. The nurse carries out a form of risk assessment informally to make sure that the individual is safe. Sometimes they put together some sort of plan. They spend a lot of time helping people understand the health condition, options, discuss things where they've got options for treatment, understand side effects, discuss what might happen, lots of things relating to the health condition and its treatment and its side effects. We also send out lots of what we call resources. So we call those leaflets, apps, books, all sorts of things that might be relevant and helpful to the individual. And whilst many of these might be publicly available, when you're in a situation where you are not very well or you're stressed, as Jackie was saying, you could just bombard with information. So if someone says, right, I'll send you a link to some really useful information, you have a look at that and then we'll have a chat about it next time we speak. Then that's really helpful, and you know that you're getting relevant, reliable information, because we can all Google and give ourselves a real shock as to what might be going on. We do a lot of signposting, navigating into the NHS. So people often find when they've got a serious health condition, they don't know what's available to them. So you don't know to ask. So by saying, yes, well, you should have a follow-up by now, you need to speak to your GP about that, or whatever it might be, we're helping people navigating through, helping people understand what is available and how to access it. We do a clinical assessment where we're concerned that people may have have stress or depression, and that will help us in deciding what we might organise for people. We also organise a course of therapy, counselling or other service when clinically appropriate, and that's kind of when Podplan comes in. So I'm going to flick across to the next slide, just talk a bit more about those services before I go into the detail of Podplan. So based on the clinical assessment of the nurse, they will organise something. Sometimes there's nothing that's relevant for the individual. Sometimes the most important part, well, always the most important part, I should say, is the support of the dedicated nurse, that long-term support. But they can also organise on top of that something external, such as some sort of therapies. It might be speech and language therapy, it might be physiotherapy. Talking therapies might be counselling, CBT, other talking therapies. Complementary therapies, that's things like acupuncture, Reiki, hypnotherapy. We can organise a second medical opinion, maybe a piece of medical equipment, some practical help in the home. That's someone to come in, a care quality commission accredited carer who can come in and help with things such as the laundry, some light housework duties, helping people get up and get dressed and things like that for a short period of time. Nutrition and dietitian, and many, many, many more, including Podplan membership. So it is really looking at what would be most helpful for the individual, and we regularly organise over 30 different types, but there isn't really a limit to what we provide. It's really what would most help the individual. So just talking about FSB Care in terms of elder care. So again, the model applies with the long-term support from the same registered nurse, in Dave's case, Joy, experienced in elder care and related issues, experienced in elderly illness where relevant. And so we can give advice and guidance around the health condition itself, the management of it, what to expect, when maybe that things aren't going as they should do, and when to start asking a few more questions. So that maybe things like cardiac, respiratory stroke, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, obviously the sorts of illnesses we would be expecting. Again, navigating the health system and not just the NHS, but social services and charities to make sure everybody's getting the very best of everything available to them. And yes, there is some overlap there with Jackie's work, but that's absolutely fine. We can organise maybe some medical equipment, mobility aids, things about how to live safely independently. And again, we are overlapping, but it really doesn't matter. We're supporting people physically and mentally. So clearly, those people caring for individuals, for parents, it's as Dave articulated, is a real toll on them individual, and go through a lot of emotional difficulties, maybe guilt or whatever it might be, a real struggle with some of the things to deal with. And so that's where the nurse can really come in to be a real good emotional support to the individual who's in that situation. We can also organise respite care as well, and help people find that. Through Podplan, it's around preparing for the future, residential care, end of life planning. And then, if we do come to the sad situation of bereavement, it's helping people through that bereavement, helping them work through the long-term impact and consequences of that bereavement for their families, and what I call the ripple effect of some of these things that happen. And clearly, emotional support throughout. And as always, when beneficial, we can organise a course of therapy, counselling, equipment, or Podplan membership. So the nurse is very much alive to looking at what would most help this individual. Would it be some form of therapy, or would it be the Podplan membership? And so it's there as part of that suite of benefits available. So how to access it? Well, you just go through FSB Care as you do normally. There's a telephone number there. There's the FSB Care Hub where there's lots of information on there. And provided members are logged in, they can kick an email through the hub, quote your membership number, and as Dave said, you'd get a call within 2 working days from the nurse who will be your nurse for as long as. And following that discussion, if the nurse feels that the Podplan membership would be beneficial for you, then they will put you in touch with Jackie and her team, and off it goes, really. So that's simply it from me. It was just a case of, what FSB Care provides as a reminder, and how to access it.
Thank you very much, Christine. That was very informative and really eye-opening, that the amount of services available through FSB membership and FSB Care. And I think the one point that springs out from that, and perhaps Dave, you want to expand on this, or Jackie, please do feel free, is that there is a nurse with you throughout the process, that it's not a different nurse each time, because we're seeing stories now of people seeing 4 or 5 GPs and they're not seeing the same one. But with Podplan and FSB Care, there is a single nurse that is with you throughout. I mean, Dave, how important was that with your experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want, I mean, I know the NHS and my local surgery are doing an amazing job under difficult circumstances, but A, it's hard to get through. B, you feel this guilt that when you do get through, you're taking up some time that would be better spent with somebody who's far, far worse off than me. I mean, I've painted a grim story, but I know there are people worse off than me. And each time, I mean, I think there are 10 different doctors at my surgery. So just having Joy there as my support, and Joy being proactive, by the way, I only ever called Joy once. Joy called me every single time after. Now, sometimes they were scheduled calls, but sometimes it was just oh, Joy's ringing. And you know, that lifts your spirits when somebody rings who is a medical professional, you know, who's got all of that breadth of knowledge as well, is very, very reassuring. And sometimes I could open up to Joy in a way that I wouldn't have opened up to anybody else, because you've got that level of trust and confidentiality. And I think that was really important. And I guess it was the same with Jackie as well. And even, you know, we had a long, tearful conversation when my dad passed away. And Jackie said, you do realise, because I'm executor of his will, we have another service. And I didn't know about that, but it was appropriate for Jackie to mention it. And it was early on. I tested it, and it was just, again, reassuring. The guy I spoke to, have you thought of this? I'm so sorry for your loss. Take your time. This is what you need to do next. And there was never any hard sell, because there is a paid for package, but I never felt under any pressure to take that option up. It was just kind, caring support, because they're the kind of people that Jackie and Christine attract. Those are the people that you want to be associated with when you're in this situation.
Excellent. Well, just to like to remind our guests watching today that if you do have questions, please do type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We have 2 questions that have already come in from Jane Martin. The first is, how does a member access Podplan? Do we call FSB Care, or do the nurses advise it if they consider it as a service we need?
Do you want me to? I think I've probably covered that, but I'm happy to just reiterate. So if you're not already being supported by FSB Care in some shape or form, then yes, you would need to get in touch with FSB Care, and you would be allocated to a nurse, as we discussed, and if appropriate, then referred to Podplan, but the nurse would stay to support the individual as long as they wanted the nurse support as well, but very happy to run alongside it. If you're already being supported by FSB Care for whatever reason, and you feel, well, if the nurse listens and understands that as your concern, which is the same situation of Dave's, they will suggest it. But if you're aware of it and you might want to ask about it, then feel free. If you are already being supported, then feel free. So either way, it's fine. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Thank you very much. Another question. What are the costs involved in this? Are there any costs involved to the user?
Not initially, but and there's nothing from FSB Care. I think Jackie mentioned where if you want to go on and take additional services, then there's an option, additional cost, but you may wish to add to that, Jackie.
Yeah, so there's no additional cost for all of the services I mentioned in the presentation, with the exception of where we have legal services involved. So they have discounted packages. The probate line is free, but those fixed fee packages, if you want to have a professional to do some of those steps for you, there's fixed fees involved there. And when you want to buy a product or a service, we work very hard to select only the suppliers of products, so stair lifts, for example, that we consider to be the best in the field with the best customer service. And we negotiate hard to make sure that if a Podplan member wants to buy one of their products, that they are given a discount. So we're constantly looking for value for our members from, third-party product or services.
Thank you. We've got another question that's come in. Can I get advice for my mother-in-law as well as my dad, or does it need to be your own parents and not an in-law?
I think that applies to FSB Care. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, really, we are supplying the service to you as a member. It doesn't really matter who it's about, within reason.
Well, that'd be very reassuring. I suppose when we're discussing matters of healthcare and so on, one of the questions that springs to mind, Jackie, is whether Podplan offers clinical or medical advice.
No, we don't. And in fact, that really is the great benefit of FSB Care. Federation members are in a really unique position because they can have all of the resource advice, all of the benefits that I've talked about with the support of a nurse from FSB Care. So it's really a holistic package to help members deal with their care responsibilities and free up their time and focus to work on their business, which is really what the Federation is supporting them to do.
Thank you. We've got another question from Julie Ingham. Have you considered partnering with a home care provider? And if you are you looking for more partnerships?
Yeah, we are looking for partnerships, but we don't partner specifically with home care providers, only because what's most important to me is that a member is able to make an informed choice. So if we had a partnership with a home care provider, and I imagine that you might be from a fantastic provider, but if we had a partnership and if that provider's CQC accreditation grade fell, then we might not feel that that's the best solution to be offering for our members. So we take it on a case-by-case basis, but at the end of the day, our members have got to have a fantastic experience. Their parents have got to be happy, and that's where our choice always sits first and foremost.
Excellent. Well, I hope that answers your question, Julie. I mean, what would you say to people watching that their mum and dad are in good health, and to them it's not an immediate concern? Is there any particular message you'd have for that type of viewer?
I would certainly say start sooner rather than later, because if you take 12 months to learn a little bit about how the system works, to understand the products that are available, you are going to be much more equipped, which means less stress, less time to manage whatever's going to come your way. Dave's situation was really difficult, and I think, Dave, you would reiterate that. He didn't have the chance to prepare, and he ended up actually, physically, emotionally, and mentally very drained. And by joining early, we hope to mitigate the chances of that happening. Obviously, we can't reduce all of the concerns that you have with looking after your mum or dad. Nobody can, but we work hard to minimize the impact on your life and maximize the enjoyment that they have in their life.
Excellent. Well, last call for any more questions, because we are approaching the hour mark. I think the question for Christine I've got is there any particular limit to what FSB Care can do? I mean, if anyone has a problem that is in the broad definition of care, is FSB Care open to them?
Yeah, so FSB Care is there to help members with any physical or mental illness or serious concern. So in the health arena, as long as it's a significant concern rather than, I've had a high temperature, I've been upset tummy for 2 days, where the NHS is the best place. If you've got a long-term, something that's really causing you long-term problems, then that's fine. That's what we're there for, to help people through long-term difficulties in the health arena. Clearly, we're not there to help with anything on the legal side or anything else like that, but in the health arena, then we're there for long-term support for people.
Excellent.
I think as well, Tim, there is I'm saying this now and smiling, there is a logical sequence that you can follow. I didn't, it was chaos. But the one thing that my mum, bless her, before she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, put in place was the power of attorney for health and welfare and finance. And it was singularly the best thing she's ever done. She did it for her and she did it for Dad. It's one of the first things you'll get asked when you're trying to deal with banking, maybe changing their providers for the internet or whatever. Just simple things like that. Is really, that did make life easy. So that was in place. And I think it was probably the first thing Jackie said to me, have you got power of attorney? Have you got power of attorney? Because that is a really huge step forward, because without it, it's a mess.
Thank you for that. Clive Frederick Marshall asks, is Podplan available to all FSB members, including retired associate members, or is it only just for full members?
Podplan is available to anybody that uses FSB Care, and FSB Care is available to all members, all classes of members. So yes, is the answer.
Excellent, excellent. Great member benefit we've got. In the absence of any more questions, I think we can leave it there, unless you've got any concluding remarks. I mean, Dave, what would be your recommendations to people watching this webinar?
Yeah, definitely pick up the phone, make the call to FSB Care for any issue, no matter how small. You'll have a conversation that will be worth it. When, by the way, Joy sent the link to join Podplan, I didn't click the link straight away. My brain had just gone to mush with everything that was happening. And she actually reminded me. She actually said, are you going to press this button and join up or what? Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you, Joy. You know, how many others would do that? And it was simply click, enter password, you're in.
Excellent. Well, I've got to say, this has been a remarkable webinar, and to think when you join the FSB that something like this would be open to you has been eye-opening for me, and hopefully everyone watching it today. So I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Dave, Christine and Jackie for providing some really useful information, not just on care, but also care for the elderly. I would like to thank everyone for attending and for watching. And if you enjoyed the event today, please do leave us a Trustpilot review. We really appreciate those. We look forward to seeing you again at one of our FSB national webinars. So from me, bye for now.